Good evening, good afternoon everyone. Here's our latest video update on this busy Sunday, December 3rd, the 0 hour for Mindanao. So you're now awaiting the approach of Typhoon Bopha or Bagyong Pablo. Have to note that this will be a long video. We will be running a detailed discussion on the different aspects of this storm. So to give you an idea, first we will run the numbers. We'll give you an update, a quick update on Palau. Then we'll look at the storm itself, looking at the analysis there, looking at different satellite images that we have so far. And then we'll go through the latest signal warnings from PAGASA. And then we'll go through the forecasts from the different agencies, PAGASA, JMA, and Joint Typhoon Warning Center. And then after that, we'll go through the effects of this typhoon, the winds, the rains, and the storm surges for different parts of Mindanao. And then finally, we'll run the give you a city-specific forecast, basically a timing of the worst conditions for the major cities in Mindanao. So please stay tuned for that as well. First, we'll go through the numbers. A system was last located approximately 380 kilometers southeast of the city of Bislig, which is just south of Hinatuan. Also located 470 kilometers east of Davao City, or about 540 kilometers west of Palau, now moving away from the islands. Maximum sustained winds are at 185 kilometers per hour with gusts of up to 260 kilometers per hour. The system is moving westward at 25 kilometers per hour, so Pablo or Bopha has slowed down a little bit, but still moving very quickly to the west. And look at that, still moving due west. It is gaining a little bit of latitude by the hour, but so far the general movement is still west, which bodes very bad news, unfortunately, for parts of central and northern Mindanao. Now, as we all know, Bopha moved just south of Palau last night, within 100 kilometers of Koror. Now, thankfully, the system spared the islands from the worst conditions. In fact, Koror never reported typhoon force sustained, contrary to our forecast, which is pretty good news. They have also recorded less rainfall than we have anticipated. The observation sites there are only recording up to 50 to 80 millimeters of rain. Still heavy, but again, not as heavy as what we've thought 2 days ago. We were talking about 250 millimeters of rain. That definitely never happened, which is definitely good news. But again, we are still receiving reports of damages across Koror and parts of Palau, and even the island of Palau, which is on the southern end of the island chain. Like the Oceana TV, which is a local television network in Palau, has put up this album of pictures across showing the damages across Palau. You get here a tree damage. You can also see street lights and poles being damaged there as well. Majority of the buildings here fared pretty well, especially the well-built structures, which is pretty good news. Again, system spared much of the islands anyway, although we are still seeing some damages across the islands, especially in houses made with tin roofs and structures that aren't really that well built. You can see those roofs being blown off their foundations, and again damaging some of the cars and properties on the ground. You can also see this dramatic images of this house really tearing up the roof there. And the winds recorded yesterday were only around 80 to 100 kilometers per hour, so not typhoon force. However, can still do some damage, as we've seen here. So some warning definitely being shown here for our residents out in eastern Mindanao, as the system, even though it didn't directly hit Palau, still did damage. Imagine what will happen for some of the cities out here in Mindanao, especially that a typhoon will directly barrel down through some of them. Now, thankfully for Palau, weather conditions are continuing to improve there. They are still reporting some light rain showers and some gusty winds from the south, but all in all, weather should improve there, and Bopha should not be a concern anymore. Now, looking at the latest infrared image, you can see the system has weakened actually earlier this morning, but again re-intensified. Very strong typhoon, back to a category 4 according to Joint Typhoon Warning Center. And the first thing that probably catch your eye is that pinhole eye has redeveloped, a very small eye with a diameter of only around 10 to 15 kilometers, surrounded by a thick ring of very strong convective activity, very cold cloud tops as well. We are seeing a wedge of dry, or at least weaker convection along the eastern quadrant, perhaps some sort of dry and perhaps even some shear, As you all know, we have a pretty strong subtropical ridge anchored over the Philippine Sea. But all in all, the system looks pretty healthy, and the strongest it has looked in the past 12 hours at least. And in fact, Joint Typhoon Warning Center are expecting this to intensify a little bit more just before making landfall by tomorrow morning. Now, looking at the microwave image itself, system again weakened earlier this morning and actually late last night, because of the eye wall replacement cycle that has happened. As it crosses Palau, we saw the inner core dissolve completely, but looking at the latest microwave image right now, are seeing that core becoming better established by the hour, which would probably mean that the eye wall replacement has been successful. And, again, which would probably translate to the current intensification that we are seeing. Now, aside from the eye wall replacement cycle, we are also noticing that the system is moving across an area of light vertical wind shear out here just east of Mindanao. You can see this wind shear value is just 10 knots. Typhoons and developing tropical cyclones like light wind shear, so the lower value, the better environment for intensification. And as system goes across this pool of this region of relatively light wind shear, it is allowing the system to re-intensify. And aside from the wind shear, system is also moving across relatively warm waters out here in the Philippine Sea. It is getting cooler though as we move into eastern Mindanao, but still warm enough to sustain its strong typhoon intensity. Now, once it moves across Visayas, perhaps in the next 2 to 3 days, especially out here in the South China Sea, you expect the system to start gradually weakening, as the waters here are relatively cooler now compared to the Philippines. You can see the orange and bright yellows, those indicate high ocean heat content, whereas out here in the South China Sea we are seeing blue and lighter green shadings, which would mean relatively cooler waters and also less energy for the system to really suck and to really utilize in terms of its intensification trend. But for right now, the critical part here is the next 12 hours basically. Again, the system will be moving at least through favorable conditions, which would allow it to intensify a little bit more. Perhaps not regain super typhoon intensity anymore, but high-end category 4 is possible before making landfall. Now move our focus towards the Philippines, especially out here in southern Philippines. We run through the signal warnings as of 5 p.m. So the newest warnings from PAGASA. You can see here to the left the list, and you can see the map over here. The red shadings are the provinces under signal number 3: Surigao del Norte, Siargao, Surigao del Sur, Dinagat Province, Agusan del Norte, Agusan del Sur, Misamis Oriental, Bukidnon, Davao Oriental, Compostela Valley, and Samal Island. I'm guessing they forgot to add Davao del Sur here, but I'm not really sure. We will check that with them. We move on to the signal warning number 2, the provinces under the blue shadings. Here you have Misamis Occidental, Lanao del Norte, Lanao del Sur, North Cotabato, Zamboanga del Norte, and that also includes some provinces out here across Visayas. We have Southern Leyte, Southern Cebu, Negros Oriental, Siquijor, and also Bohol under signal warning number 2. Finally, we have signal warning number 1 for Zamboanga del Sur, Maguindanao, Sultan Kudarat, Sarangani, and South Cotabato. And also for Visayas, we have some signal warning 1 up for Eastern Samar, Western Samar, Leyte, Biliran, Aklan, Antique, Capiz, and Iloilo, Guimaras, Negros Occidental, rest of Cebu Province, and also Camotes Islands under signal number 1, and also actually parts of Palawan, also part of under signal number 1 there. So we now move on to the forecast here, beginning with PAGAS's latest forecast track, again released at 5 p.m. today, forecasting a generally west-northwestward track, perhaps making landfall here in Bislig or near Hinatuan, perhaps early tomorrow morning, passing across northern Mindanao, passing perhaps near the city of Cagayan de Oro by tomorrow afternoon, then moving across the islands of Siquijor and perhaps here across southern Negros, passing south of Panay, and also perhaps moving across northern parts of Palau and out here in the Calamian Islands, and another group of islands out there. Finally, we have Japan Joint Typhoon Warning Center's forecast, almost similar forecast with PAGASA, tracking again generally west-northwestward, making landfall here in Bislig and passing across perhaps in Cagayan de Oro, passing generally the same islands as we've mentioned before. And as for the intensity, Joint Typhoon Warning Center forecasting this to at least intensify a little bit more to 125 knots later this evening, perhaps before landfall. That would be around 230 kilometers per hour. The landfall timing would be around 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. local time, and then moving across Mindanao, perhaps exiting by tomorrow afternoon, and moving across the islands out here in central Visayas. As it moves across western Visayas to Lucy, it will start to weaken, but still remain a typhoon as we move throughout the week, only weakening slightly as it heads into the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea by Friday and Saturday. Finally, we have the Japan Meteorological Agency's forecast, somewhat north though in terms of landfall point compared to Joint Typhoon Warning Center and PAGASA, forecasting a landfall near to Hinatuan and then moving across Agusan here, tracking just north of Cagayan de Oro, perhaps by 5 p.m. tomorrow afternoon, Tuesday, and then moving across. Compared to PAGASA and Joint Typhoon Warning Center, you can see JMA tracking the system across the southern end of Cebu. JTWC is forecasting this to track across Negros, whereas for JMA tracking across southern Cebu into Negros and also the southern tip of Panay, weakening also along the way, but still typhoon up until perhaps Thursday, weakening to a tropical storm once it reaches northern Palawan, and weakening thereafter as it moves into the West Philippine Sea or the South China Sea. Somewhat similar timings across the board in terms of the forecast from JMA and JTWC, also forecasting this to end up across the South China Sea as we move into Friday and Saturday. Do remember that the tracks showing here are the center of the storm, the core of the system. The strongest winds extend upwards of up to 100 kilometers. The strongest winds extend up to 50 kilometers away from the eye. The tropical storm conditions extend upwards of up to 140 kilometers away from the storm center, and not only the winds but also the rainfall amount. So even if the system doesn't track into eastern parts of Visayas, say across Leyte and Samar, still expect some rainy conditions out here, and even into parts of southern Luzon, out here in Mindoro, and even parts of southern Tagalog, including Metro Manila, as we move into the latter part of this week. And speaking of the effects, why don't we start looking at the wind estimates here from the GFS model using the Wonder Map from Wonderground. Pretty good software actually here. And as we go through time, you can see the eye of Bopha now approaching in from the east as you move into 18 UTC, perhaps by 2 a.m. Tuesday morning Philippine time. You can see the eye just east of Mindanao, just southeast of the city of Bislig, and also just southeast of Hinatuan. Landfall will be occurring right around 21 Zulu, will be around 5 a.m. local time, Philippine time, so again much earlier than forecast. But do note that the strong winds are already occurring 3 hours before that, so expect the worst conditions to begin here by midnight across the eastern portions of Mindanao. Again, you can see the strongest winds, the violet and the purple shading from the east into the cities out here across the coastal sections, northeasterly direction of the strongest winds here. And then as we move into by 11 a.m. Early Tuesday morning, the eye of the system will be tracking across the perhaps Cagayan de Oro, bringing some strong winds across the northern part of Mindanao, across here in Surigao City, also here in Butuan, the islands out here in Bohol, and also parts of let's move that there. You can see the islands of Siquijor and even parts of Cebu and Leyte impacted by the strong winds from this system. But that is just one model. Here we have another computer model. We are using COAM's model, which is a pretty good forecast inside 24 hours. And we begin here by around 12 UTC, would be around 8 p.m. Later this evening, the system, you can see the eye east of Mindanao. And as you go through time, perhaps by 18 Zulu by 2 a.m., you can see the system just east of Bislig, east of Mindanao, and again making landfall. by 8 in the perhaps much earlier than that, by 6 a.m. again, and passing across central and northern Mindanao, weakening but still regaining typhoon intensity once it exits through the water. And you can also see tracking just south of Cagayan de Oro city here, bringing some strong tropical storm to even typhoon force conditions, and also tracking into southern tip of Negros as you move into the Tuesday evening, perhaps by 8 p.m. tomorrow. We've given you an idea now on the winds of the system. Let's talk about the rains. This is one of the major aspects of this tropical cyclone. Remember last year, keep talking about tropical storm Washi or Sendong. It was only a tropical storm, but it brought lots of damages because of its heavy and widespread rainfall, especially out here in Cagayan de Oro City. So let's look at the COAMS model, seeing what it shows for the rainfall. And this is the accumulated precipitation. The values to the right are in millimeters. You can see as you go through time, see the system making landfall here by 2 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning. You can see already we're seeing some very heavy rainfall across parts of eastern and southern portions of Mindanao. We do have some pretty high mountains out here, Mount Tiwalwal, Mount Kitanglad, all rising up above 5,000 feet, higher than that in some places, in some points. You also have the Mindanao range out here passing across even the Compostela Valley, also seeing some pretty high mountains, and that will squeeze water out of these rain clouds, out of these feeder bands. And again, as we go through time, as we head into by 11 a.m. and by 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. Tomorrow afternoon, you can see the trail of heavy rains being left by this system north of Davao, which is good news for those folks, but we'll still see some light to moderate rain showers. The heaviest will be concentrated along the northern portions, though, across Agusan, across Bukidnon, and also the other provinces right under signal number 3, and even actually across Zamboanga. You may see some heavy rainfall there as well. You can see the green shading here corresponding to 500 millimeters of rainfall as you head into Tuesday evening. So again, very heavy rainfall, and again the coverage of these rainfalls are across the mountainous areas, so the cities and towns right under the right in the valleys, and also across the rivers that will be flowing from those mountains. You better watch out, because those rivers will definitely swell and definitely rise over their banks, especially out here in Cagayan de Oro. We know what happened there last year. Hopefully the government has done enough to at least minimize the damage. Now, talking about the northern part of Mindanao, though, across Butuan City and also across in Surigao, we may see some rains here, but lighter compared to what we will see across south, perhaps right around 200 millimeters, but still, those are some pretty heavy rainfall amounts there. Some of these cities only receive 200 millimeters in a month. We're seeing that in less than a day out here, courtesy of tropical storm Typhoon Bopha. Definitely very significant forecast. Finally, we take a look at the wind, the wave or the storm surge effects of this system. The coastal areas that will be impacted the most will be along the eastern and northern portions of Mindanao, across Surigao, across the provinces of Agusan and Surigao. Also cities out here across the islands of perhaps Leyte and even into Siquijor and Bohol. As we go through time, as we head into the early morning hours, you can see the eye of the storm there approaching the eastern coast of Mindanao. You can also see the wave heights. These are in feet, and actually move that to the right a little bit. Again, you can see that values to the right, those are in feet, and you can see some red shadings. Those would be around 20 feet or 6 meters. As we head through time, as we head into 3 Zulu, as we head into 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, you can see those high waves being brought in by the typhoon from the east to the west, impacting eastern sections of Mindanao, even some of the islands out here in Visayas, seeing some pretty high waves. Very dangerous, definitely, across the coastal areas. That's why they are being evacuated as we speak. And as we head into the afternoon hours tomorrow, by Tuesday, the system will be moving across Visayas. So those wave heights will now be focused primarily across the Visayan Islands out here in Cebu, Negros, Bohol, and other parts of the region there. Again, you can see the center of the storm moving across Sulusi, and again bringing those high waves the intensity and the coverage of those high waves will lessen and will decrease as the system makes landfall. But again, it's giving you an idea of how high the waves are. Pretty high for a storm like this. It is a category 4. It can produce those numbers that we have just seen, 5 meters to 6 meters. Those are some pretty significant. Do hope that if you are in low-lying areas, especially in coastal sections, that you have evacuated and have heeded the warnings of the local officials and the local government units in your area. Now finally move on to the final aspect of our forecast for this afternoon. We have here the timing for the worst conditions for selected cities in Mindanao. We begin with Bislig and Hinatuan because they will be impacted the most. We expect the storm center to pass very near those areas later this morning. Again, the worst conditions would probably occur from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. Could see some winds of upwards of up to 160 kilometers per hour. That's why they are under signal number 3 out there. Davao City will probably fare better because the system will pass 150 kilometers north of that city. We will still see some tropical storm conditions though, winds of up to 100 kilometers per hour and also some light to moderate rain showers. Worst conditions will occur from 6 to 12 p.m. Surigao City 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. Some very strong winds as well. Remember, they are on the northern tip of Mindanao. Open waters all throughout, so giving the winds, not having enough friction for the winds to slow down. Butuan City also right near the coast across Butuan Bay, so northwesterly winds probably from 120 to 140 kilometers per hour, possible from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Cagayan de Oro City also from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Slightly lesser winds here because of the mountains, but still it's still right along the coast there, so we could still see some typhoon force winds and also the rains and the possibility of overflowing banks of the rivers there. So definitely a very dangerous situation evolving for much of Mindanao. Now as we move on to Dumaguete and Siquijor, the islands just north of Mindanao, we expect the worst conditions to be around 2 p.m. to 8 p.m. Remember, these cities and Siquijor mainly is surrounded by water, so we expect also those higher winds to be recorded there, even 140 kilometers per hour or more. Now remember, we are talking about the worst conditions, the time where the highest winds will occur. Remember, the tropical storm conditions, light rain showers will begin much earlier than that and will end much later than the times we've seen, we've shown here. For example, for Bislig, we expect the light rain showers to begin as early as this evening, perhaps by midnight, and it won't end until perhaps tomorrow afternoon, by Tuesday, perhaps around 3 to 5 p.m. So the worst conditions will probably mainly occur during the morning hours, but dangerous conditions will still persist all throughout tomorrow afternoon. And the same thing goes for the cities that we've shown here. And that ends our very long and very in-depth video update for this afternoon, early evening actually. Thank you for watching. I hope I've given you enough information and detailed information on different aspects of the system. We do hope you have heeded our warnings we have been saying for days now. Again, if you are in low-lying areas, in coastal areas, in mountainous areas, please, if you haven't evacuated, do so now. Coordinate with your local officials. Find where the evacuation and the designated shelters are. Please take your loved ones with you. We will have another update tomorrow. And also, just a note that westernpacificweather.com is experiencing some issues at the moment. We are receiving lots of visitors for the past 24 hours, and that has seems to have crashed our servers. We will give you updates through our Facebook page and also on our YouTube page. Search Westpac Weather for Robert Speta's official weather video updates there. For any questions or comments, you can email me at philippineweather@yahoo.com. And finally, always make sure to go to this official website. Again, these videos that we are showing you, they are not official warnings and forecasts. They are not in any way official, not endorsed by PAGASA nor by JMA or JTWC. So please you can go to the website, and you can also listen to the local radio and television for the latest official warnings for your locale. Stay safe, guys.